single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has already taken place. George Shaw once said these words, "It is quite relevant in cross-cultural communication. Although you may not think that you have gotten your message across, it may have been interpreted differently, or maybe not even at all. The illusion that you have effectively communicated causes problems that must be overcome." According to andaman.org, only 6.2% of the world's population cite English as their primary language. With this in mind, chances are you will encounter a situation that involves a cross-cultural communication. Cross-cultural communication can be difficult, but knowing the barriers that are present allows you to more effectively overcome them. Stereotypes and misunderstandings of words are some of these barriers that must be overcome. The use of an intermediary can be a valuable asset in overcoming the barriers of cross-cultural communication. Racial stereotypes must be overcome in cross-cultural communication. It is important that both parties suspend judgment as it interferes with communication and creates a sense of hostility. When in a situation of cross-cultural communication, it is important to evaluate the person you are speaking with on an individual basis to avoid stereotypes. Each person is unique and separate from the culture they come from. According to esortment.com, last updated in 2010, stereotypes usually reflect differences in socioeconomic status, religion, or dialect. These differences are apparent in all races and cannot identify one single group of people. Stereotypes do not address this and instead classify based on the culture as a whole, not the individual. Stereotypes only represent a small truth and are often stretched far beyond that. Stereotypes attempt to categorize an entire culture and do not represent the individual as their own person, and therefore can lead to misunderstandings in communication. For these reasons, when communicating with someone from another culture, it is important to avoid stereotypes. With cultural stereotypes overcome, the next barrier to effective communication is misunderstandings of word meanings and usage. Misunderstandings about the meaning and usage of words and expressions can occur during cross-cultural communication. The many different dialects to a single language can complicate cross-cultural communication. Words can have slightly different meanings depending on the dialect from which they are spoken. According to analytictech.com, knowledge of language does not automatically give you the background knowledge that the native speakers assume you share. Some words will have a stronger meaning than what another dialect might interpret them as. Also, accents may vary within the same language, which can make it difficult to understand the words that are being spoken. Another complication that can result is interpreting the intent of gestures. Gestures may be widely used in cultural to mean a simple yes or okay, but in another culture they could be interpreted as offensive. How people interpret a specific gesture varies across cultures. It is important to be aware of the gestures that you use whenever you are involved in cross-cultural communication. False cognates are yet another complication in cross-cultural communication. A false cognate is a word that sounds similar to another word in a different language, but does not mean the same thing. If the person you are talking to is not fluent in your language and does not recognize the word you used, they may assume it means what it sounds like in their own language. These assumptions could create major difficulties in your communication. As with gestures, it is important to be aware of this possible problem. As you can see, the meaning and usage of words and expressions can cause miscommunications. An intermediary may be able to help overcome this obstacle. Intermediaries can be a valuable asset during cross-cultural communication. An intermediary is a person who is fluent in the native language of both parties that are communicating. They are able to translate both meaning and manner with which it is spoken. They can adjust the timing of words so that the correct meaning will be interpreted from them. According to Colorado.edu, some cultures move quickly to the point. Others talk about other things long enough to establish rapport or a relationship with the other person. This is why it can be helpful if there is an intermediary that can adjust the timing. The intermediary can, in some situations, help prevent problems. Although they can be a valuable asset, sometimes an intermediary may unintentionally project a sense of bias. They're often more supportive to the party of their own culture. This creates an appearance of bias, although it may not actually exist. In some situations, an intermediary may be a tremendous help in communication. At other times, it could cause even further problems. It's important to think carefully before bringing a third party in to translate. Knowing the barriers of cross-cultural communication can help you communicate effectively. Stereotypes and a misunderstanding about the meaning of words and gestures can be a serious obstacle in cross-cultural communications. An intermediary can help, but could also make the situation worse by projecting a sense of bias. The next time you find yourself in a cross-cultural communication situation, I hope that by being aware of the barriers, you are able to communicate more effectively.